Everyone should see a record box on their screen if you want to just click that you understand that this is being recorded. So welcome everyone. My name is Annie Masuda. I work with the Tobacco Retail License Program with Oregon Health Authority, and we're here today to talk about child-resistant packaging requirements for inhalant delivery systems, IDS, also known as e-cigarettes. We're going to talk about what you need to know for tobacco retail license compliance inspections. So today we're using Zoom for our platform. If you scroll to the bottom, you'll see on the Zoom control panel, there's an option for chat. You can click on that if you want to place your name in there. If you have questions that arise throughout the presentation, anything can go into that chat box and we'll be monitoring that throughout. We also have cart captions and live transcriptions are available in Zoom meeting control panel. So for English captioning, if you go down to CC live transcript to access the caption controls, there's two small arrows, and you can either hide the subtitles or view the full transcript. We also have Spanish transcription, and that can be in closed captioning. Jula, if you don't mind placing that link in the chat box, you can access it there. This will be a fairly short presentation followed by opportunities for questions at the end. We ask that you hold questions for the end or place them in the chat if they're coming up and you want to make sure that we answer them later. For people who speak or use a language other than English, people with disabilities, or people who need additional support, we can provide free help. Please call 503-569-8695 or email ann.masuda2@oha.oregon.gov. And we accept all relay calls. I'm going to pause for 1 minute just in case anyone needs to write that down. And now I'm going to pass it over to the manager of the Tobacco Retail License Program, Sarah Wiley. So over to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Annie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Wiley, and I'm the manager for the Oregon Tobacco Retail License Program. And I just want to thank all of you for joining us today, or to thank you if you're listening in to this recording at a later time. One of the most important functions of the Tobacco Retail License Program here in Oregon is making sure that young people are protected from the dangers of tobacco products, whether that's protecting them from starting to use before the legal age, or whether we're protecting them when they're very young from exposure to nicotine, which of course is a dangerous chemical that can result in serious sickness or even death if you're exposed in too high a quantity. And so the requirements that we're talking about here today are not new, but it is the first time that the Tobacco Retail License Program will be enforcing these requirements. And so we just wanted to walk through exactly what retailers will be expected to do to stay in compliance with the federal and state rules and regulations, and then to let you know what the options are for asking questions and for getting more guidance if you need anything from our staff. We do have this webinar today. We also plan to have some additional touch points, office hours for questions later in the summer and the fall as we lead into our enforcement date. And of course, the staff who are listed here on this screen are available to you if you have questions in the interim as well. We are here to help and to make sure that you're following the requirements so that we can keep kids safe. So with that, Annie, I will pass it back to you. And thanks very much.
Thank you, Sarah. I also wanted to mention some other Oregon Health Authority tobacco retail license staff on the webinar today. This is a large majority of our team. Sarah, you just met. We also have Tara Weston, who's our tobacco retail license education and enforcement systems lead. Myself, who I introduced in the beginning, Annie Masuda. We have Maxwell Madsen, who's one of our compliance specialists and one of the inspectors in the field. And then we have Jula Krusen, who's our communications lead. All of these staff will be available at the end if there's any questions. So again, we're here to talk about child-resistant packaging requirements for IDS, which is inhalant delivery systems, and e-cigarettes. or also known as e-cigarette. So what we're going to be talking about today, this is our short agenda. What is child-resistant packaging? Why is child-resistant packaging important? Oregon administrative rules and the Code of Federal Regulations. So where do these rules come from, and why is the Oregon Tobacco Retail License Program enforcing them? What do I need to know as a retailer? Example manufacturer's written laboratory testing report. And then why Oregon Health Authority, or what Oregon Health Authority inspectors are going to be looking for. I will have a few frequently asked questions, and then we'll move into questions and answers after that. So what is child-resistant packaging? So Oregon Administrative Rules, OAR 333-015-0305. This is the rules for retail sale of tobacco products and inhalant delivery systems. And this is the packaging and labeling definitions. This defines child-resistant as having inner and outer packaging that is designed or constructed to be significantly difficult for children under 5 years of age to open and not difficult for adults to use properly. This is from 16 CFR, which is the Code of Federal Regulations 1700.20 from 1995. I'll go into a little detail about this. So the Code of Federal Regulations is this specific one is a testing procedure for special packaging. And so this lays out the testing protocols, including general requirements and requirements for packaging. So this specific CFR, so this is a test that the product must pass in order to be considered child resistant. So a product is tested in a center where children under the age of 5 are given a specific amount of time to try to open the product. And so in this case, the product would be an e-cigarette or an IDS product. There's certain criteria that must be met to pass for the product's packaging to be considered child resistant. We'll talk a little bit more about what that testing process looks like and what the report looks like after shortly. So in addition to this, so having inner and outer packaging that is also intended to protect children from nicotine exposure in the household environment or other environment where a product is being used. And then packaging that is resealable for any product intended for more than a single use, such as a fillable inhalant delivery system. So why is this important? So it is a federal and state requirement that inhalant delivery systems, also known as e-cigarettes, must be sold in child-resistant packaging. Child-resistant packaging is used to reduce the risk of poisoning in children via the ingestion of potentially harmful or hazardous items such as liquid nicotine. And as a retailer of commercial tobacco products, it's your responsibility to ensure these products are being sold according to the law. The children and families of your community depend on you. So what do I need to know? Oregon Health Authority's Tobacco Retail License Program and some local public health authorities conduct compliance inspections to ensure retailers are following state and federal tobacco retail sales laws and regulations. Starting in January 2024, per Oregon Administrative Rule 333-015-0360, which is, again, the retail sale of tobacco products and inhalant delivery systems. And this is a verification of packaging that is child resistant. So compliance inspectors will begin inspecting for documentation from the manufacturer for any liquid nicotine containers, non-nicotine liquid containers, and fillable inhalant delivery systems to ensure that they are child resistant. This documentation from the manufacturer of each product should verify that the packaging is child resistant by the standards set forth in the Code of Federal Regulations, again, that 16 CFR 1700.20. This documentation is often referred to as a manufacturer's written laboratory testing report or a letter of conformity. We're going to get to what this documentation looks like shortly, but first I wanted to look and give examples of what these different containers look like. So here's an example of a liquid nicotine container. So per OAR 333-015-0305, retail sale of tobacco products and inhalant delivery systems, this is the packaging and labeling definitions. Liquid nicotine container means a consumer product that consists of a container that A, has an opening from which nicotine is a solution or other form is accessible and can flow freely through normal or foreseeable use by a consumer. And B, is used to hold soluble nicotine in any concentration. This is an example of non-nicotine liquid container. Per the same rule and definitions, non-nicotine liquid container means a container that A, has an opening from which liquid non-nicotine or liquid non-cannabinoid substances can flow freely through normal and foreseeable use by a consumer, and B, is not used to hold liquid nicotine or cannabinoids. Per the same rule, this is an example of a fillable inhalant delivery systems, or two examples. Fillable inhalant delivery systems, per the definitions, means a product that is sold without nicotine or non-nicotine inhalants, not permanently sealed, and can be opened and filled with any inhalant. So liquid nicotine is often used to fill these fillable inhalant delivery systems. All of these products, or all of these kinds of containers that we just discussed, are included in the requirements of the rule to be child resistant. I wanted to mention one more of the definitions: pre-filled inhalant delivery systems from the same rule of the definitions. This pre-filled inhalant delivery system means an inhalant delivery system that's permanently sealed, pre-filled, disposable, and not intended to be disassembled by the consumer. These are not covered by this requirement in the rules. So what will inspectors look for? So on or after January 1st of 2024, compliance inspectors from Oregon Health Authority's Tobacco Retail License Program and some local public health authorities may request that you show proof of manufacturer written laboratory testing reports for each of the e-cigarette products that meet the criteria for requiring child-resistant packaging, the products that we just went over. As a retailer, you will want to have this documentation for each of the products that you sell. This documentation needs to be on site for compliance inspectors to view on request. And failure to show the documentation to an inspector may result in a violation and a civil penalty. So let's look at what this documentation looks like and what we're looking for. So this is an example of what a manufacturer's written laboratory testing report or a letter of conformity looks like. This report was generated by an approved testing firm that tested a product for child-resistant packaging. As we discussed under that Code of Federal Regulations, 16 CFR 1700.20, this is a testing procedure for special packaging. So this is a continuation of the same report. This part of the report provides pictures of the products that were tested. So in your cases as retailers of tobacco products, they would be inhalant delivery systems or nicotine containers. Please note that this example of the products in this picture, or these pictures here, are being tested for cannabis products. In the letters of conformity that you'll have on site, you'll see pictures of liquid nicotine containers, non-liquid nicotine containers, and fillable inhalant delivery systems. So this is posted on our webpage, which is right here. Jula, do you mind posting in the chat box our Oregon Tobacco Retail License webpage? And you'll find all of the information for retailers under the retailers tab, which is found on the left of the web page. But this link will take you directly to that retailers page. We're going to move into a couple of frequently asked questions, and then we're going to open up for questions if anyone has any. So what if I don't have the documentation required to show that my product or products are being sold in child-resistant packaging? So failure to provide this documentation means that you are out of compliance with tobacco retail license regulations, and this may result in a civil penalty. How do I get the required documentation showing that the product or products I'm selling are in child-resistant packaging? So contact your e-cigarette manufacturer or manufacturers if you work with several, and ask for documentation of proof that the products sold in your retail location are in child-resistant packaging that meets the standards in that Code of Federal Regulations that we discussed, 16 CFR 1700.20. And remember, you're going to need to have this documentation for each of the inhalant delivery system products or e-cigarettes that you're selling that meets the rule requirement. My manufacturer does not have child-resistant packaging for their products. How can they fix this so the products in my store are in compliance with the law? There are testing firms that offer child-resistant package testing. Use a QR code found here or on the Oregon Child-Resistant Packaging Requirements document, which we'll look at in a second, for a list from the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Oregon Health Authority does not approve, certify, or endorse these firms. So this document here is called the Child Resistant Packaging Requirement, what you need to know as a retailer of tobacco products in Oregon. So this can be found on our webpage as well, which Julia just placed in the chat box. Oregon Health Authority, local public health authorities, and Department of Revenue will be providing this document during any inspections that occur between now and January 1st of 2024. This information sheet provides similar information that's being shared during this webinar today, but you can find this again on our webpage. Look for additional communication around this same topic of child-resistant packaging for inhalant delivery systems. So we have a quarterly newsletter that as a tobacco retailer, you're automatically signed up for. Oregon Tobacco Retail License quarterly newsletter will be coming out later in June, and there'll be more information about child-resistant packaging requirements. As I just mentioned, you're able to find the Oregon Child-Resistant Packaging Requirements document on the Tobacco Retail License webpage, found either here in this PowerPoint or on in the chat box. And then we have the sample manufacturer's written laboratory testing report or letter of conformity that we went over earlier. Just to note, the quarterly newsletter also highlights important information about inspections, kind of what to expect, helpful educational material, and up-to-date information about the tobacco retail license program. So it's a great resource for anything tobacco retail license program. As Sarah mentioned earlier, we will have additional webinar dates or office hour check-in times to answer any questions that you may have prior to January of 2024. We have 2 additional webinars that are loosely scheduled for later this year prior to enforcement to allow space for retailers to ask additional questions, or maybe you find more questions that come up a little bit later. Feel free to stop in for any of those webinars. And then we'll provide the dates and meeting details in our newsletters, and you'll also receive a separate email about that whenever those dates are solidified. I wanted to point out a couple additional resources we have on the Tobacco Retail License webpage. So we have a nicotine waste disposal guide for retailers. This document is a guide for retailers to help understand how to manage hazardous waste and some of the DEQ rules around managing hazardous waste. Tobacco Retail License Manual for Retailers. This is a training manual for retailers which outlines all of the tobacco laws that this program inspects for. We also have how to comply with tobacco sales laws, and this document highlights and has checkboxes for each area that the inspectors will be looking for during compliance inspections. So this is a great document to look at ahead of time before the compliance specialist gets out there so that you already know what they're going to be looking for. And if you have questions about any of these, feel free to contact our program prior to that, and we can walk you through any of the laws and what we're looking for. We'll have contact information here shortly. And then how to read an Oregon ID. This is a detailed information on how to look or how to read an Oregon ID to ensure that tobacco sales do not occur to young adults under the age of 21. There's many more resources on the page. These are just a highlight of a few. If you have more questions about any of the rules that I referred to today, the Oregon Administrative Rules or the Code of Federal Regulations, they're listed here and they're linked on the webpage. And then if you have questions for us about inspections, compliance inspections or enforcement, please contact us at tobacco.inspections@odhsoha.oregon.gov or at 971-673-2283. Jula, I'm going to ask that we end the recording here and then we can open it up for questions.